Welcome back to the World Revolution News. I'm Thomas Jefferson and today is September 9, 2011. Today's episode is on Italy's austerity and the European debt crisis that is way too urgent to be ignored like it has been in the mainstream media.
Millions of Italians across Italy took part in a general strike to protest against their government's proposed austerity measures this week. The measures were expected to amount to €45 billion. The strike disrupted everything from transportation to manufacturing, with government offices closing as well. The Italian government is hoping that the protests don't get out of hand and lead to widespread violence, like the one seen in Greece, during which several riots have battered the country since last year. The austerity measures are needed to restore the market's faith in Italy and lowering the country's borrowing costs by reducing its deficit. Italy received some relief last month after the European Central Bank started buying Italian bonds in an effort to keep Italian bond yields down. Right after Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi announced that his country planned to pass austerity measures in order to reduce the deficit. Berlusconi's announcement was in response to European demands, and if Italy wanted European support, it must pass austerity measures to show that it was serious about deficit reduction. The Italian government was expected to pass the measures quickly, but politicians have been arguing over the proposed measures. Just like measures passed in other troubled Eurozone countries, like Greece, Portugal, and Spain, many of the proposals to cut spending and raise taxes are proving to be unpopular with the country's citizens. Passage of the austerity measures are also threatened by disagreements between Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi and Finance Minister Giulio Tremonti. It also hasn't helped matters much that Berlusconi is involved in another prostitution scandal. Now, European leaders are growing impatient with the Berlusconi government and its failure to push through the financial reforms that it promised, warning that European support for the Italian government should not be taken for granted. While passage of the austerity cuts were previously considered a sure thing, the combination of bickering politicians and striking workers has the markets scared to death. While most still expect some form of financial reform to pass, it's not certain whether or not the full €45 billion package of measure cuts will pass, and whether the Italian government will stick to them. Even on Monday, Mario Draghi, the outgoing Bank of Italy president, and by no coincidence at all, the incoming president of the European Central Bank, became the latest European leader to pressure Mr. Berlusconi to approve the measures swiftly. He went on to threaten like the rest in saying, Italy should not take it for granted that the European Central Bank would continue buying Italian debt. Investors, economists, and European regulators have begun to question whether Rome is committed to enforcing strong economic cuts after the recent policy of flip-flops. Mr. Berlusconi had proposed a pension overhaul and new income taxes, only to quickly scrap those measures when they came under fire from unions and business leaders. Protesters who marched through Milan, Rome, and other Italian cities on Tuesday said the budget-cutting package unfairly targets Italy's working class by making deep cuts in funding to local governments and public services. The 8-hour walkout by Italy's biggest union, Italian General Confederation of Labour, disrupted travel and manufacturing as protests in Rome and other cities attracted as many as 1 million people, according to the union. Addressing a crowd of an estimated 70,000 people in Rome on Tuesday, Susanna Camuso, the leader of the union, called the change to the labour law unjust and threatened more strike actions if it weren't removed. This protest didn't start this week. It actually began last month all over Italy, when the government said that it would force towns with fewer than 1,000 residents to merge with their neighbours as part of an emergency cost-cutting budget. Hundreds of mayors from cities of all sizes protested in Milan, against other measures included in the austerity budget. The mayor of Filatino, Luca Celleri, has bigger thoughts. He wants his town, in the hills east of Rome, with a population of 598 people, to become an independent state under a monarch. If that's what it takes to keep the town autonomous and protect its natural resources, said the mayor. Filatino has even printed its own currency, the fiorito, which means flowered, and which harks back to the florin, the money first coined in 13th century Florence. If fioritos become legal tender, the exchange rate is supposed to be set at 2 to the euro, or about 72 cents apiece. Tito Boeri, an economics professor at Bocconi University in Milan, said that the situation is one of high uncertainty, and we don't really know where it's going to go at the end of the day. End quote. Markets have been increasingly worried about Italy lately. The third largest economy in Europe, Italy is considered too big to fail. While the nation has a relatively small budget deficit, Italy has debts equal to nearly 120% of its gross domestic product. At the same time, Italy's decade-long economic slump is not expected to end anytime soon, making it difficult for the nation to pay off its debts. It's been a year and a half since the sovereign debt crisis in Europe began attracting the attention of the global financial community. This is the biggest problem the European Union has ever dealt with. Greece, Portugal, and Ireland are in extremely critical condition. Italy and Spain are in critical, while Germany and France are the pilots that are flying the terminal aircraft. Most major European banks are massively exposed to European sovereign debt, and most of them are also highly leveraged. When we see nations such as Greece, Portugal and Italy start to default, we will have more than a few major European banks go down in rapid succession. This will spark a domino effect across the continent, and eventually it will infect the US financial systems, just like the Lehman Brothers collapse in 2008. Or worse. The EU has a larger economy and a larger population than the United States does. They also have more Fortune 500 companies than the US. The amount of banks worldwide that are attached to this fiasco is more than you can imagine. As we were filming last night, US Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner was flying to southern France for a group of 7 finance ministers meeting, and he will deliver a clear message that Europe must act swiftly to douse the growing sovereign debt crisis. If the housing crisis a few years ago was equivalent to throwing gas on the world, then the European debt crisis would be the flame that sets off the massive financial fire around the globe. How long this recovery will take is anyone's guess. My name is Emily Pankhurst, and thanks for watching.
Please tune in next week for World Revolution News, and as always, it's the United Banking Cartel versus us, not me versus you, for we are the many, and they are the few.
Have a good weekend, everyone.